Sunday nights at 7:30 p.m. only on WESU Middletown 88.1 FM.
You're listening to 88.1 FM WESU Middletown, a community service of Wesleyan University. Up next is The Business Buzz with Jeff Sherman, taking a look at innovative and cool technology and businesses right here in Connecticut. Catch The Business Buzz each and every Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. as part of our Monday through Friday 4 p.m. local talk block, only on 88.1 FM WESU Middletown.
The Business Buzz on WESU is proudly sponsored in part by Carlson and Demir, located right here in downtown Middletown. Carlson and Demir providing legal representation for victims of serious injury and for those facing criminal charges. On the web at carlsondemir.com, 860-819-1034.
And welcome to another edition, a special edition kind of on the Buzz today. We have Marty Keenan in Studio B, as well as Chris Calandra. But we also have Paul Matthews, who works for Elliott Wealth Management, the company that Chris owns. And Paul has a very interesting background, and it goes into really what we've been talking about 2 weeks ago. With Walt Hampton, and it's kind of on the subject of motivation. And in particular, we're going to at least tee it up with overcoming obstacles, overcoming setbacks. How do you not get just immersed in negativity, looking at woulda, shoulda, coulda, or what might have been, and how do you proceed forward? Or how do you kind of adjust to maybe retweaking what's good for you, what's going to make you happy? If you once had a lot of material wealth, now you don't. If you had huge positions and now you don't, how do you both readjust your thinking, be appreciative of what you have, but also maybe even better yet, how do you reformulate the go-forward plan? So I certainly welcome Paul to the show. Paul, thanks for coming on.
You're welcome, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Well, you heard how I teed it up, and I guess the first real question is, many people, especially, I know you've been listening to the show for a while. In fact, you were on the show when you had your company, Higher Aspirations. And many people during that time, 2008 up to like 2011, what have you, had significant setbacks. They were on the show. They called in. And things have certainly gotten better. But the quintessential question is still, how do you, and someone that, has experienced setbacks yourself, how do you readjust your mindset?
It is not easy to do that, and it's basically taking the setbacks that you've had in the past and the losses that you've had, or and in my case that I've had, and starting over and having an awareness that the setbacks, there's lessons to be learned there, life lessons, and things. Sometimes they happen because of things that I've done or that you've done. Sometimes they happen because of outside.
Let me interject something. That to me is very powerful. What you just said. Taking ownership, because nothing happens in a vacuum. Many times, there are setbacks, that there are forces that were bigger than the individual, but yet there's still the individual. Isn't part of a positive or a healthy process would be to look at not only the forces that got you, but your own response to those forces, i.e. potential mistakes and missteps that you might have made. Not you personally, just people out there.
Yeah, like in a lot of situations in life, it comes down to balance. And, it's in my case, when my business started failing, I took all the responsibility for that. I didn't give any outside forces credit for that. I didn't give any outside forces credit for my successes either. I took it all. My ego was out of control a little bit.
Okay, that's important too, because that's actually something I can relate to very well. There were times in my life that my ego couldn't get through the door. And isn't that maybe some of the seeds of someone's demise? Because when you think you know it all, are all, that you aren't as in touch with maybe forces that are acting against you, or maybe you're not prone to take advice, or maybe all of that above. There's no sense filling in every detail, but couldn't hubris be the starting point of a demise?
I completely agree. Although there are people that I know with large egos that have continued on a successful plan as well. So
okay,
it
yeah,
doesn't necessarily lead to your demise.
This is a pretty rich discussion, and Chris, I think you're very lucky to have Paul as someone in your organization, because obviously he has not only intelligence but depth, and I think that's important. That's interesting that you say that, because I've known people that just skate. You haven't, I haven't, other people haven't. How do you not look upon the people that have skated without a degree of jealousy or envy? Or is that just natural to do that?
That's a great question.
That is why I am at the apex of this whole thing.
That is really an A-plus question.
I am just, it's...
Here comes the ego.
It is just amazing to
Start of the weekend.
It's just amazing to be me, Chris,
No,
sometimes.
but you're right, though. There are some people...
Did I tell you one thing that I had like a mirror in my bedroom? I mean, in my bathroom. Now it's like a surrounding mirror. I bought it at Home Depot, so I can get all angles of the king.
That's a little scary.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. But it's a great question, because there are people in business that make mistakes, that make misjudgments, or might be in the wrong place at the wrong time, but they manage not to get blown up. And sometimes it's skill, but the reality is, and this is philosophical, sometimes it might just be dumb luck, and somebody else could do 9 things right, but the 10th thing they don't do right, and it ends up really bad for them.
In some cases, wouldn't it be for people who had businesses and maybe had put a business plan together? So, they might have a contingency based on if it was just an individual who's going through that. So I think probably in two different instances, they'd probably be dealt with in 2 different ways.
They could be. And, Chris, you do bring up a good point in terms of sometimes, and Paul comment on this, sometimes it's almost better because there's some degree of rationality and force reaction. In other words, what Chris was saying, if it's just dumb luck, sometimes it's harder to process than, I was drinking brew in my office and I got fired. I mean, there's a cause and effect. If there's no cause and effect, sometimes it's more difficult to deal with, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah. I mean, it's, speaking for myself and my business, we had a very well done business plan. And in the business plan, we had written in that our revenues from a couple of different sectors would dry up in a catastrophic economic collapse. And it would be, and there would be no way for the business to sustain itself. That was written into the business plan, and that's what happened in 2008.
Now,
it didn't make me feel any better.
No, it did make you feel better. And by the way, we invite our callers to call in at 860-685-7700, 685-7700. And the question is, and we'd love to get callers, listeners, to share with the rest of the listening audience and us in studio, have you had a time in your life that you've had a tremendous setback? And obviously, things are anonymous. So, did it crush you? Did you never recover? That's all. That's all more than understandable. Or were there things that you did to say, "I'm not going to let this bring me down"? I think this is an awesome discussion point. We'd love to hear from our listening audience at 860-685-7700. 7700, 685 7700. So when you saw things maybe not going according to plan, did you have a degree of denial? Was that part of it, maybe? That's difficult. In other words, when things are not going according to plan, that's a very cold and hard truth to face that, isn't it?
Yeah, and the denial, denial is a subtle foe. And sometimes denial doesn't feel like denial. I was not in denial that things were difficult, that the business was not doing well, and the economy was collapsing around it, which had a significant impact on the spending power for our customers. But what I was really in denial about was I wouldn't deny the fact that I wasn't going to come up with a way to fix it. Again, it was the ego thing. So that's a situation where my ego, I didn't let the thing die a quick death. I fought and fought and fought, and I always, at the end of every day, when I looked in my three-way mirror, thought to myself, I'll figure out a way to fix this.
Okay.
I'll figure out a way to fix this.
Marty, don't you think that's more than understandable, that if someone has the brains and the initiatives to start a business, that you would think that I'm the one who's going to be able to solve it?
I think it's the passion that they bring to their job or their vision for what they had tried to create, and it's more of an optimism that I can make this happen, and I can see what the different characteristics are, and maybe I can fix it so much that I can make it pivot in another direction, or just get it to a point where I can maintain it so it doesn't totally disappear. So there's probably different levels of being able to keep the business together.
Mm-hmm. Chris, what do you think of that? Yes.
No, I think Marty brings up a good point, and the reality is, with the economic collapse, a lot of people were hurt that probably shouldn't have been hurt, and it's a little bit of unlucky. But maybe we could talk a little bit. And you're right, Jeff. I've known Paul a very long time, 16 years, and we've had different business relationships over the years, but especially over the last year, he's been a tremendous addition to the team at Elliott Wealth. But I think what's remarkable about the setback part is that after you lose your business, to not pack up and just go home, that he, and I don't want to give out too much personal information. And for listeners, I mean, this is kind of really genuine. I mean, Paul's being completely genuine.
This is an amazing segment.
Is the idea that, after the financial collapse, people were affected, some much more than others. But the reality is, to pick up the pieces and have to do some things that others might have viewed as less than what you were, or beneath you, or Chris, not up to your standards.
That is tremendous what you just said. That is tremendous, because I think when we talk about ego and hubris, that might be a huge obstacle or roadblock to gaining traction. I think that's exceptionally great, Chris, that maybe you have to take 3 steps back, and we'll throw out to Paul. I mean, did you experience that you were doing things that you thought you'd never have to do?
Yeah, without a doubt.
And how did that affect your psyche? I mean, of course, you have to take a step back. You have to kind of readjust. I mean, did depression ever come into it?
I was fortunate enough not to go the depression route too much, but I let it have an impact on my family, my relationships with my kids, my exercise regime.
Mm-hmm.
It's.
Now, let me interject something about the exercise routine, because I think, from my own experience, I think that is, and it's all this stuff is so easier said than done. Let's make no mistake about it. 860-685-7700, 685-7700. We're talking about setbacks and your reaction to them. I think, and it's hard to do when you're going through crap, is maintaining a fitness program. I think there is a mind-body equation. And I think that's, to me, I think that's extremely important. What do you think in retrospect?
Yeah, and and then add the spiritual side to that too. So that there's, it's mind, body.
Mind body. Chris, Marty, what do you think about the mind body
I think it's,
interaction?
Well, it says a lot about the man who understands the fact that there is, that somewhat of a triad that you want to develop to, become a much fuller person. So, sometimes it's an opportunity rather than just a setback. It could be an opportunity if you're able to keep in mind those ideas and maybe develop yourself in different directions.
That's right. We have a caller, Jeff.
So we do have a caller, and let's see what he has to say. And obviously, the subject is setbacks. Caller, are you there? Caller?
Hello.
Caller, are you there?
Yeah, I am here.
Awesome. So you've listened to the conversation. I think it's a critical discussion point. I think that it's not talked about enough. And from my own experience, in terms of just, living life, I think that might be the key to success. I believe the way someone deals, it's that old adage, and I don't like old adages, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with it. I think it's critical. What do you think?
I agree 100%. You got to play the cards you get dealt, and sometimes you don't get good cards, but you got to persevere and move forward for your own, for yourself, for your family, etc. My own personal situation was I worked for a major corporation, and my job got relocated to a place. One, I didn't really want to go. Two, my family situation was such where it would not have worked out for me. So what was in the cards was I was going to be out of a job. Mm-hmm. So I opted not to go. And fortunately for me, I had some time on my side because there was a date certain that I would be out of work, and I was able to find employment prior to that day, and I actually went right into another job, which was good, and I was very fortunate. And then I had a long commute. I was fairly working fairly close to home, and the next thing you know, now I'm an hour away, and over time it got even further away. So I had a long commute, and I just didn't want to do that. So I had to make another big decision, which I'm going to leave this company on my own, and I'm going to work close at home because I don't want to do this commuting. So that was in itself, a self-imposed situation that I have now found employment close at home. So make a long story short, it all worked out. I mean, I'm very fortunate. But on the other hand, some of the events that occurred, I had no control over.
And how do you deal with that? Because to me, sometimes, like, I don't know if you heard this, like, if you screw up, so to speak, sometimes it's easier to process that than something that you have no control of. It was not your fault, so to speak, but what still hit the fan. I mean, sometimes that's even harder to deal with that, isn't that?
Probably true, yeah. Yeah, it depends. And there's a lot of variables, it depends on the circumstances that the person's in at the time and so on and so forth. But, if you screw up, well, that's hard to pick yourself up and go forward. But, and then the other thing you pointed out in your show a short time ago, too, sometimes people are in denial, and I think that happens more over I screwed up, and they don't want to accept the fact that, it's on them.
That might be true. Now, it seems like you did well. You handled your setbacks in a good fashion. Do you know anyone in your circle of friends or acquaintances that maybe they didn't handle what you handled or experienced as successful? Do you know anyone that kind of just took the slide and kept sliding?
Yes, I know people that, unfortunately, not many, but a few, that it was crushing for them, and it was very hard for them to recover. And actually, they didn't recover to the level they were at before the proverbial stuff hit the fan. They really didn't recover, and became bitter people, and really blamed everybody else but themselves for what happened.
Interesting.
And I say that only because it may be true that what happened was out of their control and it was from other people, but how they handled it was on them. And they could have could have handled it differently.
Final thought is there any observation that you had that maybe our listeners can learn from in terms of the difference between people that got through it in good fashion and those that didn't? Anything that comes to mind? One thing that might come to my mind is some people I know that didn't get through it in good fashion wallowed in the misery, whereas others moved on. Any validity to that?
You got to just stay positive, have confidence in your own abilities, and never give up.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the call. 860-685-7700, 685-7700. Now, Paul, the caller, before he left us, talked about never giving up. It's sometimes easier said than done. How do you not, let's say someone's unemployed, especially in the dark days of, 08 to, 2011, whatever, that, you're out there, you start out with a positive attitude, you're out there humping it, and then 6 months, 8 months later, you're still humping it. How do you persevere? How do you not just say, okay, this is just too much?
I mean, you got to believe. If you're doing the next right thing.
That was the Phils, 1980. You know that?
Yes,
there you go.
But
if you're
Tug McGraw.
If you're fighting, that's right. If you're fighting that fight and really looking for the next right thing to do and getting help along the way from people that are around you and your network, mentors, leaders that are within your sphere of influence.
I like that reaching out. 860-685-7700, 685-7700. We're talking about overcoming obstacles. No man is an island. Some, especially men, have a problem with that's wussy stuff. I'm not going to be talking to anyone. I think that's key. I think you got to kind of reach out, don't you, Paul?
Yeah, you do. It's it is letting go of that ego, humbling yourself enough to know that not only that you need help, but there's people around you that are willing to help, and reaching out and doing things with numbers and with the power of your sphere of influence, and that.
But you said you had a pretty big ego, is something that I can certainly relate to. How did you drop that ego and reach out? Because you were always the man in charge, and how do you say, well, this thing's a little bigger than I can handle?
Right. I, like everybody, am a work in progress. I was born imperfect, and part of my imperfection was an enormous ego and my chief motivator being competition, and that's a little bit of a dangerous combination.
Why is it dangerous?
It works really well when things are going well, and it works really lousy when things go bad.
Marty, what do you think about that? Competition works really well when things are going well, and it could be very detrimental when things are not.
Particularly if you're on the losing end of the competition.
Oh, that's what we're talking about. Yeah,
exactly. But I'm interested in it's a pridefulness. If you're prideful and then pull away from it because you don't want to face it, or you're so proud that you're going to move forward, that's the balance. And then to go.
I think that's a very good point. Actually, you could have pride cometh before the fall. Yeah, you could be so prideful that you're not going to, seek others' opinion and help, or you're going to be prideful and say, this is not going to get me down, I'm going forward.
And if they're able to reach out to those folks, they're not going to give you answers. They're going to give you pathways. They're going to give you alternative points of view. You're going to be able to build the spiritual as well as the commercial that Paul was talking about earlier. So you're going to have like a mentor. You're going to have a guide. You're not going to have an answer man.
I agree. 860-685-7700, 685-7700. We're talking about overcoming obstacles, which I certainly believe is the key to success, because like the old adage says, that it's not what happens to you, because something will happen to you. It's how you deal with it. So I'd love to hear any stories of success and even stories of failure or not complete success when you've dealt with obstacles. And have you dealt with setbacks that were out of the blue, not just business, but personal? I mean, you think you got a great marriage and the wife comes home and says, I'm leaving you for a surfer. I mean, that's kind of tough. So these are all good questions, and these are real life scenarios that sometimes. And I think something. I think if you have a period, this I can certainly I know that if you have a extended period of time of just unmitigated success, I think that sometimes can be dangerous, a dangerous combination or scenario, because then when things do hit the fan, you're really not prepared.
That's right.
You know?
Totally agree. And where do you draw the line when it comes to winning and losing? For me, I know, I could have wins all day long at work, come home. This was before my journey, and if I invited you over to play wiffle ball in my backyard and you beat me somehow, which would never happen, but if you did, I would lose sleep that night. I couldn't turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
I was competitive to...
Now, did you play wiffle ball when you were a kid?
All the time.
I don't know if the kids played as much as they used to, but my friends and I, my brother and I, wiffle ball against the garage door.
Yeah.
Was amazing.
Manufactured in Shelton, Connecticut.
I wonder if it still is.
Oh, yeah,
probably one of the only things Malloy's holding on to. And he'll screw that one up anyway.
But with what you guys were talking about, I'm reminded, being a sports fan, you take Mike Tyson, or more recently Rousey, what's her name? The
Ronda
female.
Rousey.
These were fighters that were feared, and they were powerful, successful, undefeated fighters. But once they lost one fight, the whole trajectory of their careers and seemingly their lives, you don't get a full glimpse of what happens privately, but there's ample evidence that everything completely changed with just that one loss, because it's such a shock to the system.
Who am I anymore?
They have a hard time.
I think it's a very good point. Yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to. That if you have a string of success, it's almost like you teams that a big winning streak, and then they get a couple losses, and all of a sudden they lose their composure.
Sure, but taking it one step further, so they've had this monumental collapse after nothing but successes. But that's not the end of the story. That's not the finish line. So where are they now? And what are they doing to make those things maybe the best things that's ever happened to them?
Okay, I like 860-685-7700, 860-685-7700. We're talking about setbacks and your reaction to them. Love to hear a story of success or a story of failure or somewhere in between. But I think, Paul, what you've just said could be sometimes that success can be more external than internal, meaning if everything's rocking and rolling, sometimes if you don't have a sense of spirituality, of family, or of appreciation, it could be a hollow success. Whereas when you get a setback and you might have to regroup and, again, build from where you've never thought you would have to go, sometimes, and please comment on this, you might have a better sense of appreciation from a lower rung on the totem pole. Is that not possible?
Yes. Somebody said to me probably 2 years ago, the best gifts are wrapped in pain. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I think it's a phenomenal saying. And I think, there is a lot of growth. There's a lot of...
You had a girlfriend that was into S&M. She used to tell me that all the time.
That's who it was, actually.
There you go.
I told her I was a surfer.
There you go. So anyway, sometimes that's true. And also, like we were saying, sometimes the seeds of failure are wrapped in pleasure or success.
Yeah.
What about some of these TV shows that show these lottery winners, right? And all of a sudden it's a regular person who has hundreds of millions of dollars, and they really didn't have to work for it. And you see the opulence that they start to live their lifestyles with. And, so many of these folks have gone back to bankruptcy in some instances because they've never managed their money.
Percentage.
Those are people that have had great opportunity and then had it melt down. I'd like to see.
I think that's a good point, but I think that goes less about how to manage money. I think, let's say if someone was on welfare and they struck it rich. They made, $10 million. I think it's more about themselves. They still, no matter how much money, feel that they are still a welfare person and only deserving of that. So they do things to self-destruct. What do you think of that, Chris?
I think that's true. I would add that, if you have a hole in your life, whether it's spiritual or physical or relationship or whatever, you try and fill that hole with money. There's not enough money that'll ever fill that hole.
I think that's true. I think I see people that, not personally, but in the news or whatever, like Carl Icahn.
Yeah.
Okay. God bless him, whatever. He's probably like close to 90. Yes. I'm all for making money. Totally on board with that. Totally on board with success. But I'd have to say, he's playing pop psychologist, but there's got to be something there that he just, don't you have friends? Don't you have a wife? I mean, just enjoy yourself, dude. You got like 5 years, 5 good years left. I don't get it. So,
Trump sideman on the deregulation side right now.
Yes, he is. 860-685-7700, 685-7700. As we wrap up the segment. Now, Paul, you're certainly a person that is, very positive in terms of motivation. Anything that you can kind of, as we wrap this up, anything that you can say to our listeners in terms of getting through a bad time, both from your own expertise and maybe from your own experience. How do you do it? You were once, head of a department, an international department of the XYZ company, and now you're no longer there. And maybe because of your own fault, not yours, but this fictitious character, all your self-worth was wrapped up in your accomplishments and your money. So now that it's gone, you're kind of left naked. How do you kind of rebuild?
Yeah. Well, for me, I think, the hardest part of all of it was I lost hope. There was a lot of things going on.
How long did that take within the whole experience?
Just the part of losing hope?
Yes.
I would say I was without hope for 4 or 5 years. Long time.
That's a long time.
It's a long time.
And that must have taken a tremendous toll on you, I would imagine.
Yeah, Chris was talking about the hole. There's, that becomes a hole. And I left it as a hole. I didn't fill it with anything, but I was tempted to. I just recognized it as the hole that it was. But and then, I did some things and went on a little journey and, got to a place where, among other things, I got hope back. There was a lot of things that went into my getting my hope back. But when that happened, and it happened quickly once I went on that journey, things started turning around. And I realized that no matter how far down I was or how mentally, emotionally, and spiritually bankrupt I was, that things were going to get better, and that I just needed to.
Anything in particular made that sea change? I mean, 3 years without hope. That's a very difficult thing to experience. I mean, was there something that you just woke up one day, or how did that? How did you get hope back?
That's a great question. I guess
I am so underutilized, aren't I?
You can listen to Jesse Jackson.
There you go.
Keep
keep up the line.
Jesse Jackson. Reading self-help books. To be honest with you, watching Super Soul Sunday, a lot of Super Soul Sunday, and listening to some people who knew how to meditate, knew how to get in touch with themselves, reading the Tao. It's I'm not a religious maniac or anything like that, but.
I actually think, from my own perspective, I think a degree, you don't have to be a religious man, but some degree of spirituality might be one of the key pivotal factors that get someone through not having hope to success, don't you think?
Yeah, they say religion is for people who are afraid of going to hell, and spirituality is for people who have been there.
Wow.
Wow, that's a good quote.
Mm-hmm. I like that a lot.
Yeah. I kind of fit into that, I think. A little bit, and it's it doesn't happen from isolating or not trying to improve, but but I had to reach a spiritual, mental, and emotional bottom, which I did, and
you think that makes it? I don't like adages. platitudes, but do you think that's sometimes true that you have to kind of reach rock bottom? I don't suggest.
No, I don't actually.
You don't?
No, I don't. I don't think it has to get there. I think today, I could see things heading in a wrong direction and stop it there. I don't have any more bottoms, and I don't plan on having any more. It's recognizable when there's a mindfulness and an awareness of it.
Nice. Any last questions on this segment, Mr. Keena?
I love the fact that, he says he's still on his journey, and you never really do get all the answers. I mean, that's a lifelong learner, so it's not about just book learning. It's about really learning about yourself, and if you're whatever career you are, that's going to make it that much more rewarding, whether it's in business or in education or whatever service industry you're in or your own entrepreneurship. We had the gentleman call in last week who was doing the site construction stuff, and he was blazing his own trail and feeling good about things. So I just say keep making it happen, folks. We're going to have to make it for ourselves.
And Chris, any last question on this segment?
I know we didn't have a lot of callers, and this is a little bit of a different subject for us, but I think it's a fascinating subject because life is tough. So everybody has setbacks, and to some they may seem small, but if it's your own personal setback and you're on your own journey, we all have dark days. We all need help, and it's a great discussion. And having Paul come on and be so open and
I have to give him a lot of kudos for
is wonderful
for doing that. I think obviously he's a man of not only intelligence but depth, and I think that's I think, like I said, it's not all about calls.
Yeah.
I think it was a
no.
great segment, and I know that to me, I thought, again, it's over almost 40 minutes. Flew right by.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of excellent material, and I think that's something that we should pick up on again because, like you said, I think many people suffer in the shadows.
Sure.
And probably some people felt intimidated about calling in because it's painful to talk about, in quotations, your failures. But I think we probably reach some listeners that might not have ever called in.
I would hope so.
Do you think this translates as we transition to perhaps talking more of the political stuff that we normally do? Do you think some of these strategies could actually be attributable to folks who are feeling rather uncomfortable about the outcome of the election and the uncertainty that goes there? And
I think they need to get a job and need to really get a life and kind of move on. And you are an adult and you need to deal with setbacks like an election.
Well, it's the loss of medical care. It's the
that hasn't happened yet. But if you're really gonna be freaking out about a election 3 months later, I can't help you. Sorry, I'm a compassionate guy, but if you're still freaking out about an election, sorry, the number you've reached is not in service at this time. Paul, it was an excellent segment. I love it, and we are going to transition. And I'm going to tee it up first to Chris. Chris, I was listening to you last week.
Yeah.
And kind of being the, if you will, equal broker, okay? But I believe you were moreover correct. I'm going to throw out there, and then I want your comment, and I'll get Marty's comment. I see the Democratic Party, the way they're behaving, accelerating the seeds of their own demise, like false outrage. With Sessions. Well, Loretta Lynch was having meetings on a plane. I mean, all these different types of things. Does it? And then the whole thing about during the state of the address to Congress. The female constituency of the Democrat dressing up like the suffragettes in white. I mean, do they become caricatures of themselves?
I think so, and I think there's ample evidence that there's a lot of that going on. And if you look at the scoreboard, and the best way to count the scoreboard is, over the last 8 years, beginning with President Obama's first election, the Democrats nationwide have lost over 1,000 seats from the top of the election circuit with the presidency all the way down to state houses. They have had a very, very, very bad 8 years.
Horrible years. But how did the whole being older than you, there was once a time when Democrats and Republicans were, yes, Democrats were more liberal. They were into more social programs. The Democratic Party or Democratic personnel of 30 years ago would be thrown out of this party in 5 seconds.
Yes.
I mean, not even 5 seconds. I mean, they believed in, even Clinton was going to build a wall.
Yeah, because I think, and actually I heard this term from my dad, and he probably heard it from someplace else. But for a lot of people, and I put you in this category, Jeff, is that you didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left you. You didn't really move that much.
No.
They moved, and you stayed pretty much where you are, and you've had an evolution like we all do in thinking as time moves on. But mostly the Democratic Party left you. You didn't leave the Democratic Party, and I think there's a vast amount of people that are in that camp.
Before you throw out the money, like, how does it get to a point that you went from maybe a party that would embrace immigration, okay, to now embracing illegal? Like, there is no illegal. You had your guests at a lot of Congress people from the Democrat has illegal. Their guests were illegal immigrants.
Sure.
I mean, how does it get to?
I mean, in Trump's speech, when he talked about defeating ISIS, they didn't even clap and give a standing ovation for that part. I mean, I think that's unique in history where we have an enemy, and how we deal with that enemy is open to debate. But I don't think the idea that ISIS is our enemy is really debatable. And for them to not react in a way that was supportive, at least the words that the president was saying at that moment, it seems a little ridiculous. And the same thing when he identified victims of crime that was perpetrated by illegal immigrants. And it doesn't mean all illegal immigrants, but he was giving examples of a problem that he perceives. And, they groaned at that. Like, pointing out victims of immigration is something that's forbidden. I think that they are not going to change enough hearts and minds in this country to begin winning elections again with that kind of thought process.
So, Marty, how did your party morph from JFK, which he had no place in the Democratic Party, 0, 0, 0, to what it is now?
Well, if we're going to go that far back, it's labor, AFL-CIO, Teamsters, all those guys, that was all Democratic Party. And then as we decentralized our workforce and it went all over the world, when we lost the union power, I think a lot of the bones of the Democratic Party, the operational part of the Democratic Party, and the constituency base of the Democratic Party was gone. And so they lost their constituency in reality, but in their own minds, they thought they had it. And so here we were in the Democratic election, and they thought they had the Obama constituency, and it had all these characteristics, but they took it for granted. And so they never really understood who they were.
No, I understand structurally, but from a philosophical standpoint, how'd you go from, let's just say, left of center to left of left of left of left?
Yeah. Well, that's troublesome for me. I'm more of a moderate Democrat. There's a lot of the party that I don't agree with. And there's a lot of things in the Republican side that I do agree with. So, I'm more of the common sense party.
Sure.
But the fact that after the speech the other evening and we had the Democratic response, the fact that it came from a retired governor in Kentucky, that, you think you'd have a younger person who's going to be moving the party forward, not even the two Democratic leaders now. I mean, they have their own time. But to put a young legislator who,
yeah, but they get shut out of the party. Like, I forgot his name. He was from Ohio.
Just the wrong optics.
The guy from Ohio, he seemed like a reasonably moderate person. Keith Ellison almost won the head of the DNC.
Yeah. Sure.
I mean, ties to the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah. Well,
if that's not
Bannon on one side and you got him on the other. So
well, the whole thing about Bannon, Chris, I'll throw out to you before we go to Paul. How overrated is the Bannon thing?
I think the Bannon thing is overrated. Steve Bannon has a lot of influence, and maybe you don't like the influence he has, but you could counter.
Message.
You could counter.
What is the message that troubles you?
It's the exclusion of people. It's the
who does he exclude?
Well, he's excluding the people initially in that immigration ban. That was all banned, and then they had to pull back from that. I'm not saying it's not an ongoing thing, but the overall philosophy.
You're on board with allowing immigration from countries that don't have governments that are basically terrorist
states. I'm
states.
About merit-based immigration that even President Trump was the other evening, and saying if these people have documentation and they've been scientists and they happen to go home and now they want to come back to the United States, they should be able to do that if they've been productive citizens.
Okay. Paul, what do you think in terms of politically, just as maybe a neutral observer, you have a certain, time frame and experience level. What's your observation about the Democratic Party metamorphosis?
Yeah, I guess I don't have much to say about that, but and I think a lot of it has to do with right now the strength of the Republican Party as opposed to the any dramatic changes in the Democratic Party, but. And I think, the strength, the metamorphosis of the Democratic Party will in large part be a reaction to how well or not well Trump does.
I think that's the key right there. 860-685-7700, 685-7700, 685-7700. We're talking about the metamorphosis of the Democratic Party. I'd like to hear from someone that's, either kind of really digging this whole thing and they're speaking to what you want to hear, or someone that might be a little more troubled by it. So, Chris, what happens as we move forward? It seems like, Jeff Sessions, okay, he met with some Russian, diplomat, recluses himself from, investigating the campaign, which I think is fine. But to talk about removing him, I mean, it seems like there's a overreaction on everything on the Democratic side. They're talking about already impeaching Trump. He's only been in office for a month.
Yeah, but they started 29 days ago talking about impeachment in some circles. So listen, I mean, the Jeff Sessions, let's say the Democrats are successful, and let's say that he did lie, and let's say that it was bad form, and he did meet with the Russians, which he's entitled to. It's more the cover-up, if there is a cover-up, that's the problem. So they get rid of Jeff Sessions. How does that help them advance their agenda and how they want to lead the country, and how do they win elections?
Okay, the question is, what is their agenda? First you, then Marty. What is the agenda of the modern Democratic Party? That is at the crux of the matter.
Disruption. That's all they want to do. They just want to disrupt the whole thing. They'll throw more stuff out there, much like Trump is throwing stuff out there. It'll be the total disruption. Nothing will get done. I think that's their tactic.
Okay, I know it's their tactic, but what is the core philosophy of the modern-day Democratic Party?
I think that's yet to be determined.
Like, in other words, if the Democrats were in power...
Civil rights, I'm sure, will always be at the core.
If the Democrats were in power now, at some level of the government, or all three levels of the government, whatever, what would they actually want to try and accomplish? Now, I know they'll give out the platitudes. We want to give every child a chance, and we want, but I mean, really, what would they try and accomplish? I mean, Donald Trump, for all of his faults, and there are many, it is very, very clear what he wants to accomplish. And he was elected on that platform, and he's acting on that platform. And the Democrats lost, but I'm not even really sure what they lost on. It was more they lost the election, but I don't really know what agenda.
There was no agenda, and that's why they lost. It was only demonizing Trump and playing basically identity politics that's worked for 30 years. And guess what? It didn't work anymore. Caller, are you there? Caller? Caller, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, so what say you?
So my thinking on the Democratic Party and how they have left their constituency, I believe, is largely based on the fact that, as Marty was alluding to, the erosion of labor unions, and I would add civic organizations, which in large part funded the Democratic Party. And once labor unions had been eroded, the party, was starved for funding, and where they turned? Well, they turned where the money was, which is big business and corporations, who are now controlling both parties, and both parties are beholden to big business and corporations and not the interests of the middle class.
Caller, I think that is a very great point, and I think that there's an awful lot of truth to what you had said. So is it fair to say that the add-on to your good point is that when they've done that, they've alienated what's now considered the Sanders wing of the party? More progressives feel alienated within their own party because of this turn that you've just described that was in many ways for financial reasons. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. So I'll agree with you completely, which I think is unusual for the two of us to agree. But
I think you're right.
Yeah, and I think, but you're right, is that the progressives have felt alienated and left out. With that said, I believe that the party, and I think all you guys will disagree with this, but I believe that the party needs to move further left, because that's where I think the country is headed, is in a much more progressive direction.
I think that'll
and
be...
the Democrats haven't recognized that yet. If you look at Hillary, she chose Tim Kaine, a very qualified candidate, but a very centrist candidate. And then the same with the DNC chair. I know you'll disagree with Ellison, but those progressive type politics is really where the Democratic Party needs to go.
Okay, good point. Maybe that's the way they should go with. Thank you for the call. Thank you very much. I think that personally, well, by the way, we dropped the call 860-685. We got like 1 minute left. 860-685-7700, 685-7700. We're talking about the morphing of the Democratic Party from a left of center party to a left of left party. I thought he was a great caller. I disagree with him, Chris. I think that you'll win New York, Mass, and California, but the rest of the country is going to get redder and redder and redder. What say you? If you're going
if he's right, they're going to need to have a leader and a series of leaders that are going to win that argument, and I do not see them. And I agree that Keith Ellison may have the right message, but I don't believe he's the right messenger to really carry the day and start winning over people.
I think the basic platform of the Democratic Party does not resonate in Middle America whatsoever. And if you double down on that, you're even worse.
Disappear, and the jobs don't show up in the steel mills, and they don't start to work in the small towns that just voted him. I think then it'll be,
that's true.
6, 8 months down the road. If he fails, then you're right. Then all bets are off. Yep. If he succeeds, then I think that the Democratic Party will increasingly become marginalized. Yep. So let's talk about items in the news.
Well, since the election, there's been 16 governors across the United States that have put forth legislation to limit protests. And it just seems as though there seems to be already kind of a clamping down on speech and assembly and being able to vocalize the displeasure of the behaviors that we've seen in the news so far.
Yeah, I don't know much about the details, but protesters should be allowed to protest, but law enforcement should be able to crack down when protesters get out of hand and start behaving illegally.
In Tennessee, the state representative introduced a piece of legislation that would relieve motorists of any liability should they accidentally hit someone deliberately blocking a street.
There you go.
So,
all right,
over the last couple of weeks, I'm not quite sure that would play out so well.
Let's get into buzzwords now.
Bike trails.
Well, that's one of the few things Connecticut has done well over the last 10 years under Malloy.
Yeah, rails to trails.
Yeah. I think that did you see his performance on Tucker Carlson?
Oh, my God, he's pathetic.
God, is the only special education governor I've ever seen. By the way, the views on the Buzz are only the views of the Buzz and not Wesleyan and WESU. Another buzzword?
State Department.
It's another government agency that probably
that
needs
used
to
have
operate.
Power.
Yeah, and they're pretty dysfunctional
I think
now.
Tillerson, I'm surprised he's still sticking around if he's really just traveling the world. He does that anyway. How about the whole idea of merit-based immigration? I brought that up earlier.
I think it's well overdue.
I am.
You said
that
a year ago.
Yeah.
I mean, from any it's not racism. It's nothing. You get the best and the brightest from all over the world, and that's the other thing about I have a problem with the current Democratic Party because they have no belief in American exceptionalism. It's just everything's a level thing. Let anyone in. It's not like, gee, how do you build a better country that's maybe more poised for the 21st century? We don't need any more unskilled laborers. Sorry.
How about the White House Correspondents' Dinner?
I think he did a good move to blow it off.
No, I think he would have got a lot of good
You think?
to make fun of himself, and I think there would have been some good